The woman who walked into my life 18 years ago didn't care about the size of a house or the zeros in a bank account. She cared about the way I held her hand in the dark, the way I showed up at the hospital when her world was collapsing, and the simple, quiet rhythm of a life built on mutual respect. We were supposed to be partners. But somewhere along the way, the version of Sarah I knew started to fade. She became a stranger who looked at my work, my life's passion of restoring history, with a quiet, growing resentment. She started comparing our kitchen table to the marble islands of her friends. She started measuring my worth by the labels on our neighbors' clothes. And then, one rainy Tuesday, she decided I didn't belong in the life we had supposedly built together. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Arthur, and for 15 years, I have been a restorer of broken things. I see the value in a cracked limestone column or a rotting bell tower that others have deemed unworthy of attention. My colleagues called this a calling. Sarah called it a dead-end job that kept us from the social circles she felt she deserved. I spent my days in the dust of old courthouses and my evenings in a rented house, believing that if I just kept being the man who showed up, the woman I married would eventually remember why she chose me. I was wrong. I was living a life in the shadows, not because I was hiding, but because I had been raised to believe that a man's character is defined by his own labor, not by the legacy he inherits. But Sarah had no idea that the man she was calling a failure was actually the sole heir to a fortune that spanned continents and industries, a fortune my father had spent a lifetime building in total obscurity. My father, Elias, was a man who understood the nature of power better than anyone in the modern world. He knew that when you have everything, the only thing you truly have is the people who stayed when you had nothing. He watched from his estate, his security team tracking the professional circles Sarah had begun to inhabit. He saw the shift before I did. He saw the way she began to distance herself, the way she grew restless, and the way she eventually crossed paths with a man named Julian, a smooth-talking investor who knew exactly how to dangle the kind of lifestyle Sarah thought she was owed. Julian didn't know who I was, but he knew Sarah was a connection to the high-level infrastructure he had been trying to infiltrate for years. He treated her like a queen to get to the treasure, and she let him lead her away, convinced that the man who had sat by her side through every tragedy was now the only obstacle to her happiness. When the time came for me to attend my father's final memorial, I didn't want to bring her. I wanted to protect the dignity of the house and the privacy of the grief I was carrying. But she insisted, and in a moment of weakness, I agreed. She showed up that morning in a dress that looked more like a business suit than morning attire, her mother by her side, already assessing the property lines. They didn't care that I was burying my father. They cared about the guest list. As we neared the iron gates of the estate, Sarah stopped the car, turned to me with cold, precise eyes, and told me to get out. She wanted her new companion to sit in the passenger seat so they could make the right impression when they arrived. She threw my bag onto the gravel and told me our marriage was finished, as if she were simply canceling a subscription she no longer found useful. I stood there, watching her drive away, thinking that she had no idea the ground she was driving on was about to swallow her whole. I stood in the dirt, the bag at my feet, and watched the security gate rise. But it didn't rise for her. It swung wide for me. The guards, the cameras, the entire security detail went into a rigid, immediate stillness as I walked forward. The digital display at the gatehouse didn't show her name or her companions. It flashed the name Arthur Sterling, the sole family heir to $1 trillion legacy. I watched Sarah's face in the rearview mirror as she realized the man she had just discarded was the man who owned the very land she had tried to conquer. I didn't look back. I walked into the estate, and for the first time in 18 years, I didn't have to carry the weight of a secret I thought was protecting my marriage. I realized then that my father hadn't failed to warn me, he had simply given me the space to find out for myself who was worth keeping. The aftermath was a whirlwind of social collapse and legal reality. Sarah tried to reclaim the ground she had lost the moment she saw the magnitude of the estate. She tried to frame herself as a victim of a cruel social experiment, playing the part of the confused, abandoned wife. She and her companion, Julian, attempted to force their way into the board of the conglomerate, pulling strings and leaking documents in a desperate attempt to seize control of the assets they had been coveting from the start. They didn't understand that my father had documented every transaction, every conversation, and every betrayal. He had left me an offline drive containing the truth, not so I could exact revenge, but so I could defend the foundation of what he had built. When I finally stood in that boardroom, I didn't yell or demand, I simply presented the facts, and watched as the very people they had tried to manipulate turned their backs on them forever. I often think about the fountain in the south garden where I stood after the board had made its decision. Sarah came to me then, not to apologize for the betrayal, but to justify her choices, saying she had performed the role of a wife for so long that she forgot how to actually be one. I looked at her and realized there was no malice left, only a profound, hollow sadness for the person she had allowed herself to become. She lost the life she was reaching for because the structure underneath it was made of greed rather than character. I kept the house in the suburbs and continued the work of restoration, because that is where I find the peace that the billions never bought. I built the foundation of the Theodore Sterling Foundation to give back to the towns that have been forgotten, making sure that those who are truly struggling receive the help they deserve. I didn't keep what my father built by destroying those who tried to take it. I kept it by remaining the same man who sat in the waiting room all those years ago,